My name is Ava Caldwell, and if you'd told me 4 years ago that I'd graduate college not with a hangover or dread, but a job offer and a load of responsibility I never asked for, I would have laughed in your face. I wasn't the type to chase after dreams with reckless abandon. I was methodical, intentional, the kind of person who color-coded her class notes and scheduled study breaks like meetings. So when Novacore Systems gave me a job offer before my senior year was even halfway over, it didn't feel like luck, it felt like validation. Novacore wasn't flashy like those startup unicorns that offered kombucha on tap and beanbags instead of chairs. It was a mid-sized company, mature and focused. They cared more about clean code than cloud, which was exactly my kind of environment. During my internship, I stayed late to debug frameworks, rewrote sections of their legacy infrastructure no one wanted to touch, and took initiative on a security protocol that apparently impressed more people than I realized. So when the offer letter landed in my inbox, with a respectable salary, benefits, and the promise of room to grow, I accepted it without hesitation. My friends were panicking about interviews, ghosted emails, and endless LinkedIn scrolling. I smiled, congratulated them when things panned out, and kept my decision quiet. Not because I wasn't proud, but because I knew what was waiting for me at home. My parents, Martin and Dina Caldwell, are good people. They've always been kind, supportive, and the sort of old-school loving that makes you think things will always be okay, until they're not. They'd done everything to get me through college. No lavish allowances, no free rides, but they scraped and budgeted and sacrificed. When I got my job offer, I'd planned to move out. Nothing extravagant, just a modest apartment close to Novacore's Glenbridge campus where I wouldn't have to tiptoe around creaky floors and hear my dad snore through the vents. But they asked me to stay. "We just need a little help until things even out," Mom had said over dinner, her fork swirling limp spaghetti around her plate. "We'd love to have you home, sweetheart. It's just, things are tight," Dad added, not quite meeting my eyes. At first, I felt flattered. Then I felt guilty. I owed them so much, didn't I? They had driven me to coding boot camps, paid what they could toward my tuition, and sent care packages even when I didn't ask. I knew staying would mean giving up independence. But how could I say no? So I agreed. I offered $1,000 a month, more than a third of my paycheck. It was supposed to go toward groceries, utilities, and the mortgage. I justified it as a temporary arrangement. Besides, I'd still be saving. Right? At first, it felt okay. I settled into my old room, updated the paint, brought in a better desk. I told myself it was smart, even cozy. I was home, surrounded by people who loved me, and I was helping. I felt useful, valuable. Like an adult who wasn't just working but giving back. But it didn't take long for the cracks to show. The house hadn't changed, but the energy had. My parents started depending on my contribution like it was essential. Groceries got more expensive. Repairs that had been postponed were suddenly urgent. My $1,000 turned into the invisible foundation holding everything together. And no one really acknowledged it. There were no thank yous, no discussions. Just the quiet assumption that I'd keep paying because I could. Sometimes, late at night, I'd lie in bed and wonder if I'd made a mistake. If I'd moved out when I first got the offer, would they have managed without me? Was I enabling something I couldn't see clearly from the inside? Then I'd push the thought aside and get back to work. My days were long commutes, stand-up meetings, writing code, peer reviews. But I loved it. I was finally doing the thing I had spent years chasing. Building real systems. Fixing real problems. I was thriving in my job, getting praise from my team lead, Harlan, and feeling like I had finally carved a space for myself in the world. But then I'd come home, and the energy would shift. "Dinner's on the stove," Mom would say, but it wasn't an invitation. It was more of a routine update, like she was reporting a status to a roommate, not a daughter. Dad would ask me to look at bills, help figure out why the internet was slow, or why the dishwasher made a strange noise. I started to feel less like a daughter and more like the live-in IT consultant and bank. I never minded helping, not really. But it was the silence that got to me. The way no one asked if it was still okay for me. If I had plans. If I was saving for something bigger. I kept telling myself, Just a few more months. Save up, help out, then move forward. But life rarely waits for you to feel ready. Looking back, that period feels like the moment I started losing my boundaries. I was grateful, but I was also being pulled under slowly, invisibly. I hadn't yet met the version of myself who could say no, who could draw a line in the sand and mean it. All I knew was this: I had become the unexpected breadwinner, not because I wanted to be, but because no one else could. Or would. And that realization? It didn't come with pride. It came with pressure. It came with the first taste of resentment. And it was only just beginning. There are some people who glide into a room like they own it, like the air adjusts itself to accommodate their presence. My Aunt Camilla was one of those people. With her high-gloss lipstick, oversized sunglasses, and wafts of perfume that lingered long after she left, she turned ordinary days into performances. She and my mother were sisters, but you'd never guess it by looking at them. Where Mom was frugal and practical, Camilla was flashy and unapologetically indulgent. She lived with her husband Derek and their 7-year-old son, Liam, in a luxury apartment complex across town. The kind with valet trash and a gym no one used. The unit had granite countertops and floor-to-ceiling windows, but everything inside screamed maxed-out credit cards. I always got the sense they were playing house on borrowed time. Derek wore tailored suits and Italian shoes, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was faking a lifestyle he couldn't truly afford. Meanwhile, Camilla floated from boutique to spa, never working more than 20 hours a week for fun, as she put it. The first time she visited us after I started working full-time, she greeted me not with a hug, but with a comment. Still wearing that old hoodie, Ava, she asked, tapping her manicured nails against her phone screen as she air-kissed the side of my head. You know, you'd look so much sharper in something structured. Maybe a cropped blazer, something that says tech but make it fashion. I smiled politely, resisting the urge to roll my eyes. That hoodie had gotten me through endless all-nighters, coffee spills, and debugging sessions. It was practically my battle armor. But Camilla didn't see the world in terms of comfort or sentimentality, only optics. We weren't close. Growing up, she'd always treated me like a polite obligation, the smart niece, which was code for boring. Her stories always took center stage at family gatherings, the cocktail parties she attended, the designer bag she accidentally bid on at a charity auction, the time she once brushed shoulders with a reality TV star at a wine bar in Midtown. She could stretch a mundane errand into a saga worthy of a feature film. But what really defined Camilla was her talent for borrowing money. It started small, 100 here, 200 there. Usually cloaked in compliments. You're doing so well, Ava. We're so proud of you. Could you spot us a little just until Derek's bonus clears? Or, sweetheart, Liam's school is doing this coding workshop, and you know how important that is to you. I'd hate for him to miss it. I'll pay you back next week. Of course, next week never came. The first few times I gave in. Not because I didn't know better, but because the guilt came neatly wrapped in faux affection. And she always delivered it with a smile that made me second-guess myself. Camilla knew exactly how to phrase a request so that it sounded like I was denying Liam an opportunity rather than her a luxury. Liam, to be fair, was a good kid. Energetic, sharp, with the kind of boundless curiosity that reminded me of myself at that age. He had big brown eyes and a love of puzzles, and he adored talking about robots. Whenever he saw me, he'd run over shouting, "Ava, show me a game you made." And I'd melt a little. But Camilla, she weaponized that softness. Derek was no better. He was the kind of man who always greeted me with a handshake too firm and a joke that didn't quite land. He worked in finance, but I never fully understood what he actually did. Something with numbers, risk portfolios, maybe stocks. It changed every time he described it. What didn't change was his tendency to act like every conversation was a networking opportunity. So, Ava, you should think about investing, he told me once, swirling a drink at a family cookout. Let your money work for you. I know a guy who could get you in on a real estate group. Low barrier, high return. No thanks, I'd said. I'm still just getting my emergency fund together. He laughed like I'd said something quaint, then moved on to pitch the idea to someone else. Their lifestyle wasn't just unsustainable, it was a performance, and I was beginning to see the cracks in the script. Camilla posted pictures of charcuterie boards and mimosa brunches, tagged her location at rooftop lounges, and uploaded photos of Liam in coordinated outfits. But behind all that was an undercurrent of financial chaos. Still, I kept my distance. They were family, sure, but I had my own battles to fight, student loans, work deadlines, trying to preserve some kind of personal space in a house that was slowly swallowing me whole. I figured if I didn't feed the chaos, it would stay on the other side of town where it belonged. Then, one day, Camilla called me at work. I rarely picked up personal calls during office hours, but the notification flashed 3 times, and something in my gut told me to answer. "Ava," she chirped, too brightly. "Sweetheart, we should totally grab lunch sometime. I miss you." The tone was wrong, too sugary, too rehearsed. Before I could respond, she added, "Also, would you mind helping me with something? Just a tiny financial hiccup. Liam's tablet broke, and he uses it for schoolwork, and, well, Derek's paycheck was weird this month." I almost laughed. Instead, I exhaled and said I'd think about it. But I knew then, Aunt Camilla didn't just live in another world. She dragged her chaos with her like a glittery storm cloud. And if you weren't careful, you'd wake up drenched in someone else's rain. I had no idea then how soon that storm would hit my doorstep. I knew something was off the moment I turned the corner onto our street. There were too many cars in the driveway, 3, to be exact, and none of them were ours. A black SUV, a silver coupe, and a beige minivan, all crammed together like they belonged. My first thought was that we were hosting some kind of family gathering I hadn't been warned about. But a family gathering usually came with food smells, music, laughter. As I got closer, none of that was there, just the subtle hum of conversation and the sharp clang of something metal dropping in the garage. I pulled into the curb and got out, my badge still around my neck, laptop bag slung over one shoulder. The front door was wide open. Not just unlocked, open, like someone didn't even bother to close it behind them. That was the first alarm bell. Inside, the chaos had form. Boxes were stacked in the hallway. Not little cardboard Amazon boxes. Moving boxes. Some were labeled with words like Liam's toys and bedroom closet. Others were already ripped open, contents spilling out. Shoes, hangers, random knickknacks, a blender still in its original packaging. The smell of takeout and perfume hit me all at once, sharp and unfamiliar. Camilla's voice carried from the kitchen like she owned the acoustics. "Martin, do you think we should put Liam's vitamins in this cabinet? Or is that where you keep the mugs?" I stood frozen in the foyer, one hand still holding my keys. It took me several long seconds to register what was happening. This wasn't a visit. This wasn't temporary. They were moving in. I found my mom in the living room, her expression tight but composed. She looked like she was trying to make the best of a situation she hadn't chosen. She was holding a throw pillow, fluffing it with unnecessary vigor. Dad came around the corner with a toolbox, his face red and sweaty. Behind him, Derek was barking orders like he was the one who paid the mortgage. "Martin, the bed frame's not fitting through the hallway. We might have to disassemble it." I blinked. "What's going on?" "Oh, Ava, you're home." Mom turned toward me with a too wide smile. "Camilla and Derek are going to be staying with us for a little while. Just until they figure some things out." Camilla breezed into the room wearing oversized sunglasses, indoors, and holding a green smoothie like it was a trophy. "Just until the dust settles, sweetie," she said, her tone breezy, her smile all teeth. Vantage Finance let Derek go because of that ridiculous scandal. Can you believe it? None of it was his fault, of course. And our lease was up last week, and, well, timing is a witch, right? "Wait," I said slowly, looking between the 3 of them. "You're staying here?" Camilla nodded like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Just until we find something more permanent. Family helps family, right?" Before I could respond, Liam came charging down the hallway with a toy spaceship in one hand and a juice box in the other. "Ava, look. My bed's going in the blue room." Mommy says it's mine now. I stared at him. The blue room was the guest room. The one my mom used to sew in and where relatives occasionally slept for holidays. It wasn't big, but it was at least private. I dropped my bag by the stairs and walked through the house like a ghost. My sanctuary, already fragile from months of unacknowledged contributions, was being taken over room by room. Camilla's designer suitcases were stacked outside the laundry room. Liam's toys already littered the hallway. I peeked into the guest room and saw Derek's shoes neatly lined up against the wall. This wasn't just until things settled down. This was a takeover. That evening, I sat at the dinner table with my parents, my aunt, uncle, and Liam, watching them eat like they'd lived here forever. Camilla made suggestions about rearranging the furniture. Derek asked Dad how much the monthly utilities were now that the house was fuller. No one asked me how I felt about any of this. Liam knocked over his juice. My mom rushed to wipe it up with paper towels, brushing it off like it was nothing. Camilla sighed dramatically. This table really is too small for 7 people. Maybe we should swap it for that expandable one I saw online. I looked down at my plate. I'd made dinner, spaghetti with roasted veggies, because I knew no one else would. But the warmth I usually found in cooking had vanished. Camilla barely touched the food. "This is fine, Ava," she said, in the way people say bless your heart. Though Liam prefers gluten-free pasta now. His pediatrician suggested it. I clenched my jaw and said nothing. Later that night, I retreated to my room and closed the door behind me, locking it for the first time in years. I sat on the bed, breathing shallowly, trying to make sense of what just happened. I wasn't a guest. I wasn't a roommate. I was the one covering half the household bills every month, and now I was sharing a roof with 4 more people who seemed determined to reshape everything without the slightest bit of input from me. I opened my laptop and stared at the code I'd been working on the night before. A security algorithm for the smart home app I'd been building in secret. I'd named it CenterShield, and I'd poured every ounce of focus and frustration into it over the past year. It was clean, efficient, and quietly powerful, just like I wanted to be. But now, as I stared at the screen, all I could think was, I have to get out. Because no one had asked for my permission. No one had asked if this was okay. And I was starting to realize something dangerous. They didn't think they needed to. The house stopped feeling like mine not long after they moved in. It wasn't the physical space. I still had my bedroom, at least for now, but the atmosphere had shifted. I felt it in the way conversations changed when I entered a room, or how Camilla had somehow become the house's new heartbeat, orchestrating everything while my parents nodded along like eager volunteers. Evenings used to be quiet, almost meditative. Now, they were a circus of clanging pots, animated children's shows echoing from the living room, and Camilla's voice floating through every corner like a perfume you couldn't wash off. The worst part was how easily my parents adjusted. They'd been tired for months, but with Camilla here, they suddenly found reserves of energy I hadn't seen since I was in high school. My mom started baking again, mostly for Liam, and Dad put together furniture Derek couldn't be bothered with. One night, I walked into the kitchen to find Camilla reorganizing the pantry. Without asking, "These cereals were just cluttering everything," she said, holding up a box of my favorite oat clusters like it was a science experiment gone wrong. I made space for Liam's school snacks, organic, of course. He gets so cranky without his fruit bars. I opened the fridge. Half my meal preps were pushed to the back, crushed behind Camilla's sparkling waters and some kind of herbal tonic she claimed was gut-saving. I didn't say anything. I didn't trust myself to speak without snapping. It wasn't that I wanted a medal for contributing to the house, but the way I was treated, as invisible, as disposable, started digging deep into my chest like a thorn I couldn't remove. I went to work every day, came home drained, and still paid the bills. They knew this. Everyone knew this. But I had become a silent fixture, a convenient utility, like the router or the water heater. Always on, always running, never noticed unless something stopped working. Derek eventually found another job, but it was a far cry from his former finance position. He worked long hours now, and when he was home, he was irritable. Camilla chalked it up to the adjustment period, but she never once offered to step up and work full-time. My boutique job is more about relationships than hours, she explained one morning while sipping tea. You don't just clock in and out when you're curating style. I stared at her, wondering what it must feel like to live with such unwavering confidence in your own delusion. Then came the dinner that finally unraveled what little grace I had left. It was a Wednesday. I made chicken, seasoned with garlic and herbs and roasted vegetables. Simple, hearty. I set the table without ceremony. As everyone gathered, Camilla speared a piece of chicken, chewed slowly, then made a face like she'd swallowed disappointment. This is a bit bland, Ava. Maybe next time, try marinating it overnight? I watched my mother wince, her fork hovering midair. Oh no, Camilla, she said quickly. Ava probably just had a long day. She works very hard, you know. Camilla gave a smile so fake I could practically see the glue. Of course she does. I'm just saying a little flavor never hurt anyone. I don't remember how I finished that meal. I think I went numb. But later that night, the numbness turned to rage, slow and boiling. I sat at my desk, trying to focus on my code, but the keys blurred through the heat behind my eyes. I wasn't even angry that she insulted my cooking. I was angry because I realized something far worse. I could pay for this household's bills, keep food in the fridge, give up my space, and still, I would never be enough for them. A few days later, she knocked on my bedroom door. She didn't wait for an answer. She just pushed it open and walked in, like she always did now. Liam trailed behind her, dragging a stuffed alligator. Ava, she said, smiling, Liam needs new shoes. His old ones are practically falling apart, and there's a kids' event at the theme park this weekend. Would you mind lending me $300? Just until next payday. I blinked. Again. Her eyes narrowed, just slightly. It's for Liam. I looked down at the code on my laptop. I'd been debugging the motion detection module for Center Shield, something that would later become the feature everyone praised. But in that moment, it was just glowing code on a screen, my escape, the thing they never saw or respected. Camilla, I said carefully, have you thought about picking up more hours at the boutique? Or another job, even part-time? Something more consistent. Her expression cracked, just for a second. And then it hardened. You're suggesting I go work full-time? While my child needs me. He's at school most of the day. She gasped, like I'd cursed at her. You know what? That's really insensitive. I didn't expect that from you, Ava. I looked past her, to Liam, who stood quietly now, sensing the tension. I'm just saying, it might be time to look at other options. You've been here for a while now. Her face twisted into something colder. Wow! So that's how it is? We're just freeloaders to you. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. She stormed out. Liam looked back at me once, confused and quiet, before following her. The fallout came quickly. My mother sat me down that evening, tears in her eyes. She's your aunt, Ava. Family. They're struggling. And I'm not? I asked, my voice flat. I've been carrying this house. You know that. You're young. You'll bounce back. That phrase, that casual dismissal, gutted me more than anything else. You'll bounce back. Like my work, my exhaustion, my boundaries, they were all just temporary obstacles I could recover from later. Like I didn't have a right to peace now. I nodded, not because I agreed, but because I was done talking. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to fight. I wasn't going to shout. I wasn't going to explain myself again. I was going to act. In the evenings, when the rest of the house buzzed with Camilla's phone calls and Liam's cartoons and the soft padding of my mother's slippers down the hallway, I retreated to my room. I stopped trying to make dinner. Stopped lingering in the kitchen or asking if anyone needed anything. It was better this way, less interaction, fewer chances for passive-aggressive jabs or guilt-laced requests. And I poured everything into my code. I'd started working on Center Shield a year earlier, long before Camilla moved in and turned our house into a boutique circus. It began as a passion project, an idea that struck me after one too many stories about smart home systems being hacked or failing users when they needed protection the most. I imagined something smarter, more intuitive. A system that learned patterns, adjusted in real time, and offered not just security, but peace of mind. What started as a few late-night sketches on a napkin became lines of code. Weeks of research. Endless test cases. And now, I was on the cusp of something real. I worked in silence, the glow of my monitor my only companion. Motion detection modules. Biometric authentication. AI-driven threat analysis. I built, refined, scrapped entire features, and rebuilt them again. I learned to tune out the noise of the house. The laughter that didn't include me, the occasional crash in the hallway, Camilla's voice drifting through the vents, complaining about laundry or the lack of sparkling water. To them, I was gaming, or watching anime, or hiding out. I never corrected the assumption. Let them think I was wasting time. It gave me space to focus. One Thursday afternoon, I asked my manager, Harlan Price, if he'd have time for a quick review. He was sharp-eyed, mid-40s, the kind of man who could dissect an idea in 10 seconds and offer 5 better ones. But he respected innovation. And he respected me. "Sure," he said, spinning his chair toward me. "What view you got?" I took a breath and opened the demo. "It's called Center Shield. I've been working on it off hours." His brows rose with interest. "Show me." I walked him through the features, real-time learning capabilities, layered encryption, user behavior analysis. I demonstrated how the system adapted to family routines and flagged anomalies. I showed him the UI I designed myself, minimalist but rich with functionality. By the time I finished, he was quiet. And then he whistled. "Ava, this isn't just impressive. This could shake up the entire industry." I felt my chest expand in a way it hadn't in months. "Really?" He nodded slowly, leaning back. "It's everything people complain about in current systems. Overcomplicated, unreliable, clunky. Yours is smart, simple, and scalable. I want to bring this to senior leadership. Like, now." The following week blurred into NDA agreements, video conferences, legal briefings. Novacore didn't want to tweak my idea. They wanted to buy it outright. Not just fund it. Own it. With a compensation package that made my heart lurch when I saw the number, $500,000, plus royalties if they took it to market under the Novacore umbrella. I read that contract 3 times. Then a 4th. My name in a signature line. My work valued, not tolerated. Not dismissed. Not forgotten in the background noise of someone else's priorities. And I signed it. But I didn't tell anyone at home. Because I already knew how that would go. They wouldn't ask how hard I'd worked for it. They wouldn't ask what I built or how I felt. They'd ask for help. Ask what I could contribute. Camilla would blink at me with faux pride and suggest putting part of it aside for Liam's education fund. Derek would talk about debt restructuring and family investment opportunities. My parents would look at me like I'd saved them from a storm when I hadn't even been allowed to close the windows. So I said nothing. Instead, I made another decision. One I had been postponing for months out of guilt and uncertainty. I opened my laptop, pulled up a listing site, and searched for apartments near Novacore's Glenbridge campus. I found one almost immediately, a bright, 2-bedroom unit on the 5th floor of a quiet building. It had hardwood floors, oversized windows, and a tiny balcony with a skyline view. I could already picture myself there, coding in peace, making dinner without commentary, drinking coffee in silence. I contacted the realtor. Her name was Leah Moss. Direct, no nonsense, sharp. "Tell me what you're looking for, Ava," she said on the phone. "And more importantly, tell me what you're walking away from." I told her everything. Not in a bitter rant, but honestly. Factually. She didn't gasp or judge. She just said, "Let's find you something where you don't have to apologize for breathing." We scheduled a tour the next day. The apartment was better than I imagined. Sunlight bathed the living room in the late afternoon, and there was just enough space for me to feel free without being overwhelmed. I signed the lease the same evening, wire transferred the deposit, and scheduled my move for the following weekend. It all happened so fast, so quietly, like slipping out of a too-tight sweater without anyone noticing. Back at the house, I kept my phone close and my mouth shut. I coded. I planned. I made lists and packed what I could in secret, all while pretending everything was normal. Because if I said one word too soon, someone would guilt me into staying. Or worse, try to sabotage it. I wanted my exit clean. Undeniable. One night, I stood at my window, watching Liam's toy car zoom across the yard as he shrieked in delight. Camilla lounged in a patio chair, legs crossed, sunglasses perched on her head like a crown. My parents sat beside her, sipping iced tea, laughing at some story she was telling. They looked content. Settled. Like this was their home now. Like I was the guest. And maybe I was. But not for much longer. It was a Saturday, bright, clear, deceptively calm. The kind of morning that almost fooled me into believing everything was fine. I'd stayed up late the night before finishing a final run of my packing list, checking off each box in my head. I had arranged the moving company, confirmed with Leah, and picked up my keys 2 days earlier. Every step was deliberate. Every moment carefully orchestrated. I had one goal: leave with my dignity intact. What I didn't expect was to come home and find the betrayal waiting for me before I even made it past the front door. My key stuck in the lock. That was the first sign. It turned harder than usual, like something inside had shifted. When I stepped into the house, I was greeted not by silence or routine, but by the loud thrum of cartoon music and the sight of all my belongings dumped in the hallway. My desk chair. My reading lamp. My clothes, still on hangers, stacked sloppily on top of one another. My storage bins. My coding textbooks. My white noise machine. Even the aloe vera plant I kept on the windowsill, it sat lopsided in a laundry basket like it had been uprooted in a rush. I stood there, stunned, my hand still on the doorknob. "What is this?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. From behind the hallway, Liam ran past in his superhero pajamas, a red cape trailing behind him. "Look, Mommy. My new room has a Spider-Man blanket." I turned the corner and saw it. My room, the one I'd slept in since college, the one I'd repainted myself, where I spent nights building Sentry Shield, was gone. It had been completely transformed. New bed sheets. Posters on the wall. A superhero rug. Toy bins. My shelves had been cleared, my photos boxed away. My entire life, my space, erased and rebranded without a word. Camilla stood near the closet, folding something into one of her decorative bins. She didn't even look startled. "Oh, Ava, you're home. We had to make some changes," she said breezily. Liam really needed a room of his own, and the guest room just isn't ideal for a growing boy. I blinked. "So you just moved my stuff out?" "Don't be dramatic," she said, waving a manicured hand. "It's not like we threw anything away." I turned to my mom, who was standing in the kitchen, watching me with a guilty look. "You knew about this?" She sighed. "We thought you'd understand, Ava. You're barely here anymore, always working late. Liam needed space, and I'm what?" I cut her off. "The one paying the bills?" She flinched. That landed. Good. Derek appeared next, walking in from the backyard with a water bottle in hand like he hadn't just helped commit spatial treason. "Come on, Ava. It's not that big of a deal. You still have the couch." I stared at him. "The couch?" "Yes," my father said, his voice softer but no less devastating. "We just thought, until things settle, it might be best if you sleep in the living room. It's temporary." Temporary. Like everything else they promised. Like Camilla and Derek, staying for a little while. Like Liam, just using the guest room. Like my $1,000 a month contributions were a donation, not rent. I felt something fracture inside me. Not a snap, not an explosion, but a cold, final break. The kind you don't feel until after it's already done. "That's fine," I said, my voice eerily calm. Camilla turned, her eyebrows rising. "Wait. What?" "I won't be sleeping on the couch," I said, pulling out my phone. "I bought an apartment." It was like hitting pause on the entire room. Everyone froze. My mom opened her mouth. Closed it. Derek blinked. Camilla laughed, sharp and defensive. Excuse me? I moved my stuff out tomorrow, I said, ignoring her tone. The movers are scheduled for 9 a.m. I already signed the lease, paid the deposit. I'm gone. You're joking, she said. I'm not. You bought an apartment? Dad said slowly, as if the words were in a language he didn't understand. Yes, in Glenbridge. Close to work. I didn't say anything because I knew how this would go. Camilla took a step forward, arms crossed. Wait. So you have an apartment just sitting there while we're all packed in here? You didn't think to what? Offer it to us first. I turned and stared at her, stunned by the audacity. It's my apartment. My money. You've been living in this house, rent-free, while I paid for food, utilities, and half the mortgage. You gave my room away like I didn't matter. She scoffed. You're overreacting. No, I said, stepping over my own stacked belongings. I've been underreacting for months. My mother looked heartbroken. Ava, sweetheart, we didn't mean for it to feel like. It doesn't matter what you meant, I cut in. It matters what you did. And what you didn't do. You never defended me. Not once. She said nothing. Camilla's voice sharpened. You're being selfish. You have no idea what it's like to raise a child, to lose stability. I didn't take that from you, I snapped. You did. With every choice you made. And now you want to keep taking. But I'm done. I picked up one of the boxes they'd left in the hallway, my books, still neatly stacked, and walked it to my car. No one followed me. No one helped. And that silence? It was the most honest thing they'd given me in weeks. The morning sun filtered through the windows like it always did, casting soft golden light on the hardwood floors, but nothing about the day felt normal. I woke early, long before anyone else in the house stirred. My alarm had been unnecessary. I hadn't truly slept. I'd drifted in and out, my thoughts pacing all night like sentries on patrol. By 7:30 a.m., I was dressed and ready, standing in the foyer with my laptop bag over my shoulder and a small duffel at my feet. I'd packed the rest of my belongings the night before, quietly, methodically. Every box was labeled. Every drawer was emptied. I left nothing behind, not even the hoodie Camilla mocked months ago. Especially not that. The moving truck pulled up at exactly 9 a.m., right on schedule. I watched it through the blinds, a surge of nervous adrenaline rising in my chest. This was it. My exit. No more passive contributions. No more silent sacrifices. No more shrinking into the wallpaper while everyone else made decisions about my space, my time, my life. When the doorbell rang, I opened it calmly, like I'd just been expecting a package. The movers, too efficient, no-nonsense professionals, greeted me with clipped nods and started bringing the boxes down the hallway. It didn't take long for the noise to wake the house. Camilla appeared first, barefoot, wearing a silk robe that swished around her like she was descending from a throne. She blinked at the movers, then at me, her confusion flickering into irritation. What is this? I didn't bother pretending. I told you. I'm moving. You said that like, she paused, glancing around, like you were bluffing. I almost laughed. Camilla, why would I bluff about something like that? She stood frozen for a moment, then stepped aside to let one of the movers pass. So you're really leaving? Yes. Today. A moment later, my dad walked in, rubbing sleep from his eyes. What's going on? She's moving, Camilla snapped before I could answer. Just like that. My father looked at the stack of boxes being wheeled out the front door. His eyes darted from the movers to me, disbelief painted across his face. You're serious? He asked. I've been serious, I said quietly. I tried to make it work. I paid for everything. I asked for boundaries. No one listened. So now I'm doing the one thing I can control. He opened his mouth to respond, but didn't find any words. My mom appeared last, standing at the top of the stairs in a bathrobe and slippers. Her expression said it all, shock, fear, maybe even hurt. But I couldn't let myself be swallowed by guilt. Not this time. Not again. Ava, she said, voice trembling, is this really necessary? I looked up at her. You gave away my room. You let them turn my home into theirs. You treated me like a spare part. So yes, this is more than necessary. Camilla folded her arms, stepping into the center of the living room. You're just going to abandon your family? Over what? A little inconvenience. I turned to her, voice low and firm. This isn't about a room. Or inconvenience. This is about respect. Something you all stopped showing me a long time ago. She scoffed. We have a child, Ava. Liam needs space, stability. You're young, you'll bounce back. You've been bouncing off my effort for months, I shot back. It's time you stand on your own. Derek walked in then, dressed for the day, and upon seeing the moving truck through the window, immediately inserted himself into the scene. Wait, hold on, Ava. This apartment. How are you affording this? You didn't just find that kind of money lying around. I gave him a look. I have a job. I save. I plan. He stared at me, unconvinced. Are you sure this isn't something we should be discussing? I mean, if you're doing well, you could have helped out a little more. You didn't even think about offering us the apartment? Liam would have loved it. Something snapped. The entitlement, I said, stunned. It's honestly mind-blowing. He blinked, taken aback. I continued, voice firm. You all decided I was the fallback plan. The utility. The ATM with a quiet voice. But I'm not. I'm a person. And I've spent the last year drowning while you all acted like my sacrifices were just part of the background noise. Sweetheart, don't leave like this, Mom whispered. I'm not angry, I said honestly. I'm just done. And I was. Completely. Finally. The movers finished loading the truck in under an hour. I signed the final paperwork, thanked them, and walked back inside for a last glance. The house looked the same. The walls still bore family photos, the fridge still had Liam's drawings taped to it. But it no longer held warmth for me. Not because of bricks or paint, but because of what had been allowed to happen within it. As I headed to the door, Camilla called after me one last time. You'll regret this, she said, her voice dripping with certainty. I turned to her, holding her gaze. No. I'll finally be able to breathe. Then I walked out. I didn't cry. I didn't look back. When I reached my new apartment, I stepped into sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. The movers set down my things carefully. There was no shouting, no tension, no tightness in my chest. Just quiet. Just light. Just me. And in that moment, I knew I hadn't abandoned anyone. I had chosen myself. I didn't turn my phone on for 3 days. It sat on the counter of my new kitchen, silent, lifeless, unbothered, while I moved through my apartment with a sense of stillness I hadn't felt in years. No one knocked on my door. No one asked me to babysit, to fund groceries, to fix a leaky sink, or decipher a tax letter. The only voice in my space was mine, and the occasional hum of the fridge or the gentle creak of hardwood as I moved between rooms. The quiet wasn't eerie. It was divine. I woke each morning to sunlight pooling across the wooden floors of my bedroom, untouched by toys or clutter or resentment. I drank coffee while sitting on my little balcony, legs curled under me, watching the city below stir to life. My laptop rested beside me, and sometimes I opened it, but not always. For the first time in ages, work didn't feel like an escape. It felt like something that belonged to me, not something I used to justify my presence in someone else's house. Every part of the apartment was carefully chosen, neutral tones, clean lines, minimalist decor with soft lighting and lush plants. It was quiet, yes, but also alive. And mine. I cooked dinner for myself without commentary. I played my own music at a soft volume. I took long, hot showers without someone banging on the door because Liam couldn't hold it. I ate breakfast while standing barefoot in the kitchen, reading through updates on NovaCore projects or sketching ideas in my notebook for a potential follow-up to CenterShield. The possibilities ahead of me felt wide open and untangled. On the 4th day, I turned my phone back on. 62 unread messages. 11 missed calls. 5 voicemails. I didn't open the texts right away. I let them sit there, bubbling with presumed urgency. The voicemails were all from my mother, her voice cycling between worry, confusion, and regret. One message from Dad, brief and tense. Just call when you can. Camilla hadn't left a voicemail. She preferred drama in person, but she had texted twice, both messages longer than necessary, laced with condescension wrapped in faux concern. I didn't respond. Not right away. Instead, I gave myself another day. Then two. When I finally decided to visit, it was less about mending and more about closure. I needed to see the house again, not to be welcomed back, but to remind myself why I left. Why I had to leave. I pulled into the driveway with a calm, detached energy. It didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a memory. A frame I'd stepped out of. Inside, everything looked the same, but I noticed the small differences. My absence left shadows. The living room had toys strewn across the floor again, but none of the sharp tidiness I used to maintain. The kitchen sink was piled with dishes. My mother smiled when she saw me, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Ava," she said, drawing me into a hug that felt more like apology than affection. "Hi, Mom." Dad hovered in the background, awkwardly trying to look occupied with mail. Camilla wasn't in the room, but I could hear Liam somewhere upstairs, his voice echoing off the walls. "We were starting to worry," my mom said. "I needed time," I replied simply. "Space." She nodded. "We've been adjusting." I said nothing. Camilla entered then, barefoot and breezy, wearing an oversized sweater and clutching a smoothie in a glass jar like she was shooting a lifestyle commercial. "Oh, look," she said, voice light. "The prodigal daughter returns." I blinked slowly. "You know the story ends with the father giving everything to the son who stayed, right?" She smirked. Cute. There was a pause, just long enough for everyone to feel it. The discomfort, the balance of power shifted so thoroughly that even Camilla didn't know how to stand in it. "I just came to visit," I said calmly. "Not to resume anything." My mom opened her mouth to protest, but I raised a hand. "I'm not moving back. I'm not sending money. I needed you to know that." My dad finally stepped forward, voice soft. "You don't have to be so final about it." "But I do," I said. "Because the minute I don't, this whole thing resets. I become the helper again. The ATM. The peacekeeper. And that's not who I want to be anymore." Camilla snorted quietly but didn't speak. My mother looked down at the counter, her hands fidgeting. "We miss you." "You miss what I provided," I corrected, gently but firmly. "That's different." No one argued. I turned, looking once more around the kitchen where I'd spent so many late nights washing dishes after everyone else went to bed. Where I cooked dinners that were never appreciated. Where I said yes over and over until my own needs became invisible. Then I looked at my mother. "I hope things work out. For everyone. But I won't be the solution anymore." She nodded slowly, her eyes wet but accepting. "Okay." And that was all I needed. I left without lingering, without guilt tugging at my ankles. I got into my car, pulled out of the driveway, and didn't look in the rearview mirror once. Back at my apartment, I kicked off my shoes and collapsed into my armchair. I poured myself a glass of wine and opened the sliding doors to let the late afternoon breeze drift in. In the distance, I could hear the sounds of traffic and laughter from a nearby park, but inside, it was peaceful. Still. For once, no one needed anything from me. And I didn't feel empty. I felt whole. It happened on a gray Sunday afternoon, the kind that made the whole world feel like it was holding its breath. I had just returned from the bookstore with a new novel and a fresh almond latte. The air smelled like rain, and I was planning to spend the rest of the day curled up by my window with music playing softly in the background. Then my phone buzzed. Camilla. I almost didn't answer. I stared at the screen as it lit up, vibrating with her name like it was trying to press urgency into my hands. But something told me this wasn't another passive-aggressive nudge. Something told me it was time. I picked up, already bracing. "Ava," she said without preamble, her voice tight. "Can we talk?" I didn't respond immediately. "About what?" There was a pause. A shift in her breathing. "You've been avoiding us. And I think it's time you stop pretending you don't owe your family anything." That got a laugh out of me, cold, involuntary. "I don't owe you anything, Camilla." She kept going like I hadn't spoken. "You've been hiding money. You don't visit. You don't help. Meanwhile, we're struggling to make ends meet, and my son is struggling because of your choices, I said flatly. Not mine. Another pause. Then her voice sharpened. I know you didn't just magically afford an apartment like that. Something happened. So why don't you just admit it? And just like that, the dam broke. I didn't plan to say it. I hadn't rehearsed it. But the words spilled out, slow and deliberate. I sold CenterShield. Silence. I could hear the faint clatter of a spoon, maybe in her kitchen, maybe on her end of the call, but she said nothing. I created that app while I was still living in that house, I continued. While you all thought I was wasting time on games, I was building something. Something that matters. I sold it to Novacore. $500,000 up front. Plus royalties. Still, no response. I didn't say anything, I added, because I knew exactly what you'd do. You're lying, she said finally, but her voice wavered. I'm not. You can look it up. Novacore launched the first beta 2 weeks ago under their new security division. My name's in the press release. More silence. Then, your mother doesn't know, does she? I exhaled. No, not until now. But she's about to. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking, not with fear, but with a strange kind of liberation. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their understanding. But they were going to hear the truth from me. I drove to my parents' house without stopping. The sky hung low and heavy above the rooftops, and the familiar stretch of neighborhood looked smaller than I remembered, like it had shrunk in my absence. The house loomed quietly, blinds drawn, Camilla's beige SUV parked in its usual place like it had taken root. I knocked once. My mother answered, her face paling the moment she saw me. Ava, can we talk? She nodded slowly and stepped aside. The house smelled like reheated takeout and fabric softener. Liam was nowhere in sight, probably at a friend's, or maybe Camilla had sent him off knowing what was coming. We sat at the kitchen table, and I didn't waste time. I built an app while I was living here. A home security system. I sold it to Novacore for $500,000. Her lips parted slightly. You, what? I worked on it in secret for a year, I continued. At night. On weekends. While you thought I was just on my computer avoiding everyone. It's called CenterShield. They're launching it this fall. She stared at me like she was trying to reconcile two versions of me at once, the one who quietly paid the bills and cleaned up behind everyone, and the one now claiming financial independence with steel in her voice. I didn't tell you, I said gently, because I was afraid. Afraid of being used. Of being guilt. Of being treated like a bank instead of a daughter. Tears welled in her eyes. We never meant to make you feel that way. But you did, I said, not unkindly. And I stayed silent too long. But that ends now. Footsteps approached. Camilla entered the kitchen slowly, cautiously, like a cat approaching unfamiliar territory. Her makeup was perfect. Her expression was unreadable. So, she said, folding her arms. It's true. It is. And what now? She asked. You're just going to flaunt it? Make us feel small? No, I said. I'm just telling the truth. You accused me of hiding. No, I'm not. Camilla scoffed. You should be helping us. You could make a real difference. I was helping, I said, my voice rising now. I helped while you drained resources and sat on your hands. I helped when I gave you money for shoes, trips, vitamins, and I never saw a penny back. I helped while you gave my room to a child and told me to sleep on a couch in the house I funded. My mother gasped softly. Camilla said nothing. I'm done, I finished. No more handouts. No more soft answers. No more apologies for taking up space. I'm not your fallback. The silence that followed was thick and tense. And then, shockingly, Camilla turned on her heel and left the room without a word. My mother sat still for a moment, then looked at me with a kind of sorrow that almost pulled me back. You've changed, she whispered. I had to, I replied. And I meant it. Because this wasn't just about money. It never had been. This was about recognition. Respect. A life that belonged to me, not parceled out like some inherited obligation. I stood, kissed her cheek, and walked out of that house for the last time, not as a daughter trying to be heard, but as a woman who had finally found her voice. It's been 6 months. 6 months since I walked out of that house, my life packed into boxes and my pride stitched back together piece by piece. In that time, the silence that used to feel like a void has become a comfort. Not the kind of silence that weighs heavy with unsaid words or tension, but a gentle, honest quiet. The kind that leaves room for growth. My apartment is no longer just a space, it's a reflection of me. There's a piece here, tucked into the corners of each room, in the morning sun that filters through sheer curtains, in the sound of my kettle whistling, in the softness of an evening spent coding with music humming in the background. I haven't just moved out, I've stepped into a version of myself I never knew I was allowed to become. CentraShield is live now. The rollout exceeded expectations. Novacore's tech blog called it disruptive innovation grounded in intuition, and a few cybersecurity sites picked up the story too. My inbox flooded with offers and questions. Venture capitalists, industry leaders, conference invitations. Some even suggested starting my own company. I haven't decided what's next, but for the first time, that uncertainty doesn't scare me, it excites me. The royalties started arriving last month. I transferred a portion to savings, invested a little, and used some to take my first vacation in years. Barcelona. I walked the alleys of the Gothic Quarter alone, eating pastries with sugar-dusted fingers, watching the sea shimmer from a park bench. No obligations. No questions. Just me and my freedom, breathing in a life that belonged only to me. And yes, I'm dating someone now. His name is Marcus. We met at a developers meetup downtown, where he overheard me explaining backend optimization with too much passion and way too many hand gestures. He smiled and said, "You talk about code the way most people talk about art," and I laughed. I hadn't laughed like that in a long time. Not the polite kind. The real kind that starts in your chest and breaks out before you can stop it. Marcus is calm, grounded, and supportive in a way that feels easy. He never makes me feel like I have to prove anything. When I told him about my family, I braced for judgment or pity. Instead, he said, "It takes strength to leave what doesn't serve you." That's not running away, that's choosing yourself. He didn't say it like a compliment. He said it like a fact. My parents still haven't changed. My mother sends texts now and then, little updates dressed up as check-ins. Liam lost his first tooth, or your father's knee has been acting up again. She never directly asks for money, but the subtext is always there, hanging in the white space between the words. I don't respond anymore. Not because I'm angry, but because I finally accepted the truth. Some people only love you as long as you're giving. Once the giving stops, so does their version of love. Camilla hasn't reached out since the reveal. Not a word. I'm sure she spins her version of events to anyone who'll listen. How I abandoned my family. How I let money change me. But I didn't change, I evolved. There's a difference. I've learned that when you begin to advocate for yourself, the people who benefited from your silence will call it betrayal. But boundaries are not betrayals. They are declarations. I drew my line, and I stood behind it. Sometimes I still think about that couch. The one they wanted me to sleep on after all I'd contributed. The symbolism of it stays with me, not because of the discomfort, but because of what it represented. Being reduced, minimized, pushed to the side while others made space for themselves. I keep a photo of it tucked into the back of my notebook. A reminder, not of pain, but of how far I've come. This morning, I sat on my own couch, soft, modern, exactly my taste, with a cup of coffee in one hand and my legs curled beneath me, watching the city stir beneath a layer of gentle fog. I flipped open my laptop and reviewed an email from a startup in Berlin that wants to license part of CentraShield's AI module. I have options now. Choices. Leverage. And I'll never apologize for that again. I wish I could tell you that my family eventually saw my side. That we had a tearful reunion, that Camilla apologized, that my parents acknowledged their failure to protect me. But that's not the ending I got. My story didn't wrap in a bow. And that's okay. Because not all healing requires closure. Sometimes, healing means closing the door yourself and not waiting for someone else to turn the knob. I've started writing again, not code, but reflections. Journal entries. Letters to the younger version of me who thought staying silent was the safest option. I tell her she deserved more. That she didn't imagine the weight she carried. That her strength wasn't in her endurance, but in her decision to stop enduring. I tell her that choosing herself wasn't selfish. It was survival. It was freedom. I've stopped asking why they didn't see me. That question only breeds longing. Instead, I focus on the people who do. The colleagues who value my mind. The friends who show up. The man who asks me how my day really was and listens like the answer matters. The version of myself that shows up every day now, whole, proud, and no longer shrinking. 6 months ago, I walked out of a house that tried to make me small. Today, I stand taller than ever. And the best part? I never once looked back.